Hi, welcome to Nap Time Nutrition. I'm Yaffi Lvova, registered dietitian, nutritionist, and owner of Baby Bloom Nutrition and Toddler Test Kitchen. And for those of you watching, you can now know there is also the option of listening to this as a podcast. This week I was approved on Stitcher, and iTunes is pending, and Spotify will also be available. So if you're listening to this as a podcast, thank you so much for joining me in my new format. Today, we're going to be talking about growth spurts and growing pains. And you should know that I have this huge list of topics to cover, but when something happens in my own life, sometimes I just feel the need to cover it. And wow, we've been going through quite a roller coaster of emotions lately, and I'm going to talk about how you know you're going through a growth spurt, because sometimes you don't know until after, and you look back and say, that's what was going on. Oh my God. Yeah. So that's, I did not know what was going on this morning. And I spoke to my friend who's a behavioral specialist, and she said, it sounds like a growth spurt. And I said, smack my head. Oh yeah, that does sound like a growth spurt. I'm going to make an extra big snack for them when they come home. And so now my spinach Popeye muffins are in the oven, and maybe you can smell them through your speakers. We're not there in technology yet, but one day. So my personal hiccups often shape my practice. In fact, I was a clinical dietitian before getting into the public sphere with my writing and public speaking and Nap Time Nutrition and Toddler Test Kitchen as well. And all of my obstacles with my twins helped to really shape where I took my practice. So I went from doing diabetes and renal and transplant counseling to breastfeeding and sleeping and how to feed your kids, because these are things that I was going through. So if I'm going through it, you at home with parents are probably you at home as parents are probably going through it as well. So I should address it from a nutrition perspective using evidence-based information and actual facts, not nutribolics, #nutribolics. Okay, so what are growing pains? This is something that we commonly refer to in conversation when someone's ankles or legs hurt. And the thing is that it's not really named very well because it doesn't show a direct correlation with growth spurts and with increases in growth at any given time. So we call them growing pains. They don't really have much to do with growth. So what are they? Well, they happen mainly with preschoolers and teens. And they're more common in the late afternoon or evening. They may keep your child up at night with the pain. But as I said, it's not linked to a growth spurt specifically. It's linked to intense physical activity. So if you think back when your child is having some pains that may be growth pains, if you think back on what they did during the day, it's likely that during the day they were running around playing soccer or swimming or doing jujitsu or wrestling or what have you. And that pain is a reflection on that. And what you need to know is I'm going to tell you what to look for with this, because you want to be sure that you're not brushing off something serious as growth pains and that it really is just quote unquote growing pains. So what do you look for? It should be both legs. If something's happening, it's in both legs, both ankles, both knees, and it's going to be in the muscles, not actually the joints. So your child may feel it or report the feeling from their ankles or their knees, but the truth is that it's the muscle. So if you notice any swelling at the joints, that is not associated with growing pains, and that's something to discuss with your pediatrician. So what can help? Also, it's not associated with injuries. If your child had an injury and then is reporting pain, that is not growing pain. If there's a fever, decreased appetite, limping or trouble walking, a rash, I mentioned swelling, fatigue, weakness, or decrease in weight, that is not growing pains. And with any of those symptoms, you should go talk to your pediatrician and see really what's going on, because it's likely not growing pains. Not to scare you, I just want to arm you with as much information as possible, because knowledge is power. So what can you do about it when your child is having pain in both legs, not associated with swelling or fever, et cetera, et cetera? Well, you can massage. You can do a light massage. You can do stretching. Maybe you want to throw on a kid's yoga video on YouTube. and warm cloth or a heating pad, but you shouldn't use that while they're sleeping because you could inadvertently cause some burns or some discomfort with an electric heating pad while they're sleeping. So you use that before bed. And you can also give them some chamomile tea to help them relax before bed. Of course, if you're doing potty training, that may be the wrong advice. So take that with a grain of salt and see what works for you. Some people do magnesium for adults and sometimes for kids. But what you need to know about magnesium is that it's also used as a laxative. And so a standard dose may be good for one person and may send the other running to the bathroom. And that's also not something you want to deal with kids. So if you're considering giving your child a dose of magnesium, the safest way to do it is as an Epsom salt bath, because they're not going to absorb enough in order to get that laxative effect, but it is going to help relax the muscles. You don't want to do that with children too young. You don't want to do that with babies, certainly, because their skin is too delicate and they could get the water in their mouth and their eyes, and that's not going to be comfortable. So you're really going to do that with your child who is closer to 7, 8 years old and knows, don't drink the water, don't put it in your eyes, and also preteens as well. Epsom salt baths are good for anyone who is having muscle pain, as long as they are not at a place where they're going to be interacting with the water in such a way to make a laxative effect. Okay, I'll get off that now. Something else you want to do is to check their vitamin D stores, which you're going to do with their pediatrician. It's a blood test. When someone is low in vitamin D, then supplementing vitamin D can help with those growing pains. In the study that I read, in order to get this information, there were 264 kids in the study, and well over half of them were deficient in vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiency is very, very common in the United States, in Canada, and likely in Mexico as well, although I'm guessing at that one. I did a segment on vitamin D, and I will link that in the comments on the Facebook page. So you can go back and watch that one as well to understand more about vitamin D. So you should be giving a dose of vitamin D anyway. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 400 IU of supplemental vitamin D around the age of 4. And then as you get to 6 years old and older, you're going to increase that to 600 IU. If they're taking a multivitamin, which is always a good idea, check the amount that's in there. There's going to be some, there may not be enough, there may be enough. It depends on the supplement. But you do want 400 to 600 IU for a maintenance dose. If they're very low in vitamin D, which is more common if you live above the 33rd parallel, which is roughly halfway through the country, and the darker your skin is, the more likely you are to have vitamin D deficiency because you're not synthesizing vitamin D the same way. The people who have lighter and lighter skin, they synthesize vitamin D much more effectively, so they don't have to take as much. So go get a blood test, see what your level is, and adjust vitamin D dosing to the serum vitamin D level that your pediatrician will get back to you and tell you what that number is. Also calcium. Check the amount of calcium in the child's diet. I'm not very big on supplementing calcium. There was some recent research about isolated calcium supplements. It's much better to get it in food form. A lot of times that's dairy, and there are other ways to get calcium. I believe I also did a segment on alternative ways to get calcium in your diet. I think that was under a milk intolerance topic. I'll find that and link to that in the comments as well. Iron is another big one, and they generally monitor this at pediatricians' appointments. They take a little blood and they test to see what the iron level is. Someone who is low in iron may have an increase in growing pains. So that's something to look at as well and to address. And I do have a handout on easy ways to boost your iron. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email, yaffi@babybloomnutrition.com, and I'm happy to send that over. So let's talk about growth spurts, because that's the fun that we're going through in this house. And I don't know if you can tell how much fun I'm having by the bags under my eyes, or maybe the increase in white hair that well, okay, fine, you can't see my hair. But here's the thing. Childhood is one big growth spurt, but there are certain times where it's more obvious than others. There's an alternating pattern of normal growth and then rapid growth, and then normal growth, and then rapid growth. And when you have that rapid growth, it comes along with other symptoms. It's going to come along with an increase in height, which you generally notice when the growth spurt is over and your child pulls on pants that fit a week before, and all of a sudden they're ready for the floods. An increase in weight, and this is completely normal. An increase in appetite, which makes sense with the increase in weight, and other way around as well. Increase in clumsiness. That's always fun. And an increase in sleep. And I have right here in my notes, I will show you my notes, increase in jerk. I really did write that down because in my house, that's the number one sign that your child is going through a growth spurt. There's number one sign that my child is going through a growth spurt. He's being a jerk. And that may go along with the increased need for sleep and the increased hunger. So when kids are younger, sometimes they can identify their hunger and fullness, but sometimes they don't verbalize it enough. And if you put out food for 5 and 2 toddlers demolish the whole thing, chances are they're going through a growth spurt, and that is completely normal. And that's also why conversations about how many calories a child should have over the course of the day is limiting, because it changes. It's so different depending on the day, depending on the week, depending on all these different factors. So it's really important to be prepared. Like with the muffins that I'm making that are in the oven right now, and now I can start to smell them. Can you smell them? If you can't, you should head over to my blog, check out the Popeye muffins and make a batch, because each muffin has a 1/3 cup of spinach in it, but it's also banana based. And while I forgot to put vanilla in these, oops, they're still going to be very delicious with the cinnamon and the banana. That's the base of this. So thank you so much for tuning into this Naptime Nutrition. Whether you're on my Facebook page at Baby Bloom Nutrition, or whether you are on Spotify or another podcast format, I'm very happy to have you. If you have any questions, please say so in the comments. And you'll notice there were no sponsor breaks because I'm in charge of this from start to finish. So if you would like to contribute to my effort, please visit patreon.com/naptime nutrition. And you can become a subscriber, and I will send you lots of virtual hearts for that. So thank you so much, and join me next week. I'm not sure what's going to go on because the kids will be on winter break, but something will be posted. And I'm here usually every Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. Arizona time. We don't change our clocks. So right now that's 3 p.m. on the East Coast, 3:15 p.m. on the East Coast, 12:15 p.m. on the West Coast, and Wednesday morning at some point in New Zealand. So thank you for joining me. And if you're a Phoenix local, come to Toddler Test Kitchen. Check out toddlertestkitchen.net for dates and registration links. It's a culinary adventure for kids ages 2 through 6, and we really have a blast. I've been recipe testing today, so I am full and happy. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me.